there's a lot of good going on in Buffalo when it comes to their hockey team and the prospects and the development, etc. So let's take our sights over to the Sabres and their farm team and talk about a player whose name we've discussed a ton before and how his season in 2021-2022 stacks up against recent AHL players in the same age range. Spoiler alert, it stacks up pretty well. So, today we're going to talk about Jack Quinn, one of my favorite names in the NHL and its prospect system because it's so confusing having Quinn Hughes and Jack Hughes and Luke Hughes and a Jack Quinn and then another Jack Hughes getting drafted this draft. It's wild how similar a lot of these names are getting. If this was franchise mode in EA NHL, we would say that the NHL's name generation machine was malfunctioning. But either way, Jack Quinn, even though he may not be Jack Hughes, even though he may not be Quinn Hughes, he still is a top prospect that the Buffalo Sabres have in their system, drafted 8th overall in the 2020 first round. He's 20 years old, 6 feet, 176, is a right-handed forward, and he was one of the oldest players in the entire 2020 draft, as if he had been born 5 days earlier, he would have been eligible for the 2019 draft. Now, his numbers in 2019 were not really all too spectacular, but his numbers in 2020 were so good that he went top 10 as a result. 89 points in 62 games played as a sniper two-way forward for the Ottawa 67s. He had spent the year after that playing for the Rochester Americans as the OHL did not start up, and he played for Team Canada at the World Juniors, where he had 5 points in 7 games. This season, though, this was the year where everything went right. Okay, maybe not everything. He played mostly for the Rochester Americans once again, who had just gotten swept in the 3rd round of the AHL playoffs by the Laval Rocket. Or, excuse me, was it the 3rd round or the 2nd round? It's one or the other. I believe it was technically the 3rd round because there are 5 rounds in the AHL playoffs because of the extra little play-in segment that they have there. Yeah, so it was technically the 3rd round where the Rochester Americans lost 3-0 to Laval. Unfortunately, in the postseason, Jack Quinn and a lot of his other teammates got neutralized, especially in that series. He only had 2 points in 10 total games played, but Jack Quinn had himself a great year, all things considered, getting 61 points in 45 games, 26 goals, 35 assists. He went out there and absolutely spiraled into the spotlight here for the Buffalo Sabres, and even though he wasn't on the team for a long time, he only played 2 games wherein he had 2 points, fans all over the place were getting super excited for what Jack Quinn would be able to provide heading into the next few years. As we said, his shot is incredible. He's a right-handed forward, so planting him on the left side on the power play has always been a pretty significant part of the past few years. And whenever he's on the wing, he's able to just take it, snap it, and score it. It was a pretty consistent pattern we saw in the OHL as well as in the AHL too. It's good to see as well that his playmaking side also improved quite significantly. He always had a good mind for offense, especially when his team controlled the puck in the O-zone, but this season, opening up his playmaking more, making a few more dangerous passes, it was good to see the transition there for Jack Quinn. However, a quick aside, and I have to say this almost every time we talk about Jack Quinn, I do think that JJ Peterka, his teammate and fellow Buffalo Sabres prospect, a guy who had 7 more points in 15 more games, I do feel like Peterka is a lot more of a hard worker and a play driver than Quinn has showed off so far. Not that there's any disrespect to Quinn and his ability to drive a play or skate with pace, but these were part of the concerns that people were sort of talking about back when he was drafted in 2020. It was also part of the reason why a lot of people, myself included, were so shocked to see him go above his teammate Marco Rossi, who just absolutely torched the entire CHL that year. But without further ado, let's go over to the numbers and talk about some of the other comparable players that suit up here in this conversation. Jack Quinn, as we said, 61 points in 45 games played in the AHL. If you go over to the all-time record books, okay, maybe not all time, but all millennium, I guess, because if you go over to 1999 to 2000 to this season, 2021-2022, and you sort by U22 points per game, restricting the number of players on the list to players over 10 games, you can see the following names at the top of the list. When Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry were 20 years old, they each put up a 194 and 179 points per game in 05-06 for the Portland Pirates. Pretty great. You go over to 3rd place here. Alexander Radulov had 18 points in 11 games. He had a limited sample, but he was still there. Same could be said about Josh Bailey. Mike Camilleri 2. Frank Vetrano had a 153 points per game in 36 games in 2015-16. Jason Spezza in 04-05 had a 117-point year, a 1.46 points per game, or excuse me, a 1.46 points per game. Good enough for 7th overall on our list. Nikita Kucherov had an 8th overall spot with 24 points in 17 games. Bobby Ryan is here too, and then you have yourselves that Jack Quinn, with his 1.36 points per game tying him up with Bobby Ryan. You can see some of the names that Quinn has bested: Liam Foudy, Ryan Strome, Taylor Hall. You go even further down the list and you see Matt Boldy, Yuri Tolusti, Tyler Toffoli, Daniel Cleary, Jordan Eberle, Yuri Hudler, Logan Couture. There are some really good names as you go down the list, but of course the ones that we're kind of focusing on right here are the main ones in the territory of Kucherov, Bobby Ryan, Spezza, etc. It gets even better when you go over onto Twitter and you see this tweet made by Kevin Papetti. This is a list of AHL U22 scores since 2010, sorted by even strength primary points per game. So not points per game, even strength primary points per game. So goals and primary assists all at 5v5 play, discarding the power plays. You can see that Jack Quinn still has some pretty good company right in front of him. You have Mikko Rantanen right behind him, same with Alexander Holtz. He was just slightly behind Trevor Zegras and Nikita Kucherov. Now, this is U22, so the draft years are kind of differing from player to player. David Pastrnak being at number 1 is a good sign. You have Kyle Palmieri, Robertson, Kucherov, Zegras, Tyler Angle, who really doesn't get any hype himself, and then Quinn, Rantanen, Holtz, Peterka. Papetti also posted a graph of the same thing, AHL U22 scoring since 2010. However, when he sorts by primary points per game in all situations, so including the power play, Jack Quinn's number increases by quite a lot, which isn't a surprise because, spoiler alert, the Rochester Americans had Quinn on their power play and he was a great power play point producer. But Jack Quinn, based off of primary points per game for U20 players in the AHL since 2010, bested out Trevor Zegras, Brandon Perlini, Ryan Strome, Palmieri, Nick Robertson, David Pastrnak, and some other notable names like Rantanen, Norris, and Nylander. The only player better than him was Nikita Kucherov. Now, to be fair, Kucherov did all of this as a Draft Plus 3 player. Jack Quinn was a Draft Plus 2. So, the company he is keeping is definitely very good. Not gonna say that Jack Quinn is going to be Kucherov, but it's nice to see your Buffalo Sabres prospects going out there and putting themselves in a category with some of the best young players in the entire league. Zegras, of course, he just made his debut this season. He's in the running for the Calder, and Nikita Kucherov has been here for a while. But Kucherov is still in his mid to late 20s, so there's still a lot more time for him to do a lot of the things that we have seen him do time and time again, like potentially winning a 3rd straight Stanley Cup, no big deal. But either way, Jack Quinn is in that territory. Now, does that mean he is the perfect player? No. I do like the foot speed and the awareness that Nikita Kucherov has when carrying the puck up the ice himself. I do think that their shots are comparable, but I do think that these players all have other traits that separate themselves a lot from Quinn. For example, Nikita Kucherov and his off-puck play. It's so elusive and strong. That's something that I think a lot of players can go out there and try to intertwine with their game. For Trevor Zegras, of course, it's the nasty hands, it's the creativity. That's something that you can't really teach. It's a lot more of an instinctual gift that players end up getting. But for Jack Quinn, he's got himself a really strong two-way ability and a great shot. I just do feel like he can improve his pace as well as his play-driving abilities as he heads towards higher levels of hockey. Now, he's only 20, so there's definitely going to be a lot more time and development of these aspects of his game as he gets older. But for now, with the Rochester Americans, we had seen a very good baseline level of improvement from Draft Plus 1 to Draft Plus 2. Jack Quinn, ladies and gentlemen, one of the best U22 point producers in primary points per game in the last 10 years, only bested by Nikita Kucherov. And when you go back to the past 22 years of AHL players under the age of 22 as well, there are a whole bunch of players in this category that you would probably like to see Jack Quinn becoming at the NHL level. Of course, Bobby Ryan, he's kind of the brunt end of a lot of memes, especially nowadays, but you gotta remember when Bobby Ryan was in his prime with Anaheim, he was really good. Not to mention Taylor Hall, Hard winner. He's a guy that I know a lot of Sabres fans themselves have experience with seeing, but you probably want to remember the other versions of Taylor Hall that existed before, too. Matt Boldy's really good. Tyler Toffoli was great. I do see a little bit of Tyler Toffoli and Jack Quinn, not gonna lie. But talk to me in the comments all your thoughts either way about Jack Quinn and the point production comparable players. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.